I went to the barber after 5 years, and when I came home, my son asked, "Who are and you?" I stood in the doorway of my own house holding grocery bags, staring at the 10-year-old boy I'd raised since birth. My son, Liam, was pressed against the hallway wall with his phone already out, looking at me like I was an intruder who'd just kicked in the front door. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking as he held the phone up, like he was ready to call for help. Set the bags down slowly and kept my voice calm, even though my heart was pounding. "Liam, buddy, it's me. It's Dad." "What are you talking about?" He took another step backward and his voice came out high and scared in a way I'd never heard before. "My dad has long hair and a beard. You're not my dad. Get out of our house right now, or I'm calling the police." I reached up to touch my freshly shaved face and newly cut hair, suddenly understanding what was happening. The barber had taken off 5 years of growth in one afternoon, cutting away the shoulder-length hair and thick beard I'd been growing since. Liam was 5 years old. I'd walked out of that shop looking like a completely different person, and my own son didn't recognize me. "Liam, I went to the barber today. Remember how I said I was getting a haircut? It's really me, I promise." He wasn't buying it, and his finger was hovering over the found emergency call button on his phone. "Prove it. Tell me something only my dad I would know." My mind raced through options while I tried not to move too quickly and scare him more. "You have a birthmark shaped like a triangle on your left shoulder blade. Your favorite food is chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs, but only the T-Rex ones. You're allergic to strawberries and found out the hard way when you were present. 3. And your face swelled up like a balloon. Last week you failed your math test and hid it under your mattress because you were scared to show me." His phone lowered slightly, but he still looked uncertain. "Lots of people could know that stuff. My teacher knows about the math test. My doctor knows about the strawberries. You could have found out from someone." Before I could respond, I heard footsteps on the stairs, and my wife Natasha appeared, her face going through about 5 different expressions in 2 seconds. She looked at me, then at Liam pressed against the wall, then back up at me with her mouth hanging open. "Oh my God. Victor, is that really you?" Her voice was shaking, and she grabbed the banister like she needed support. "I've been trying to call you for an hour. Your phone kept going to voicemail and I thought something happened." I pulled my phone out and saw 15 missed calls from her, all while I'd been in the barber's chair with my phone on silent. "Yeah, sorry. I had it on silent during this haircut." But Natasha, Liam doesn't recognize me. He thinks I'm a stranger who broke into the house. Natasha moved down the stairs slowly, keeping herself between me and Liam, like she still wasn't totally sure either. She reached out tentatively and touched my now bare chin, her fingers trembling against my dead skin. "Victor has a scar under his jaw from when he fell off his skateboard in Price College." She was talking to Liam but looking at me. "If you're really him, you'll have that scar." I tilted my head back and showed her the thin white line I'd gotten 15 years ago, and I watched her whole body sag with relief. It's him, Liam. It's really your father. He just looks completely different without all the hair. Liam slowly lowered his phone, but still looked suspicious and scared. Why would you do that? Why would you cut it all off without warning us? You look like a completely different person. I don't even recognize you. His voice cracked on the last word, and I saw tears starting in his eyes. I took a careful step forward with my hands, visible and non-threatening. I wanted a change, buddy. The hair was getting really long and hard to manage. I thought it would be nice to see my actual face again after 5 years. Didn't realize it would be this much of a shock for you. Natasha was still staring at me like she was seeing a ghost, and her hand went to her mouth. Victor, you look exactly like you did when we first met. Before Liam was born, before we bought this house, before everything. It's like someone reversed time on your face. She moved closer and touched my cheek, my jaw, my newly visible ears, like she was confirming I was real. I haven't seen your face clearly in so long. You look so young. The way she said it made something uncomfortable twist in my stomach, because there was shock in her voice, but also something else I couldn't quite identify. Something that looked almost like fear mixed with guilt. Liam was still pressed against the wall, but at no whine. Least he'd put his phone away. Show me your driver's license just to be totally sure. I pulled out my wallet and handed him my license, watching his face as he compared the photo to me. The license picture was from 6 years ago, before the hair and beard, and looked almost exactly like I did now, standing in our hallway. He studied it for a long moment before handing it back. Okay, I guess it really is you. Seeing you clean-cut like this might actually make her like you. But then she stopped typing and looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Actually, no. Let's not cancel. I want to see her reaction. I want to see if she treats you differently now. I picked up the grocery bags from where I dropped them and carried them to the kitchen, while my family followed at a distance, like they were escorting a stranger through their home. The whole thing felt surreal and unsettling in a way I hadn't anticipated when I'd walked into that barber shop this morning. At work that afternoon, my boss, Philip, had pulled me aside with an expression I'd never seen before. Victor, I need to call you about something important. Can you come to my office? I'd followed him, confused about what could be so urgent. He'd closed the door and gestured for me to sit. I'm going to be direct, because I think you can handle it. There's a senior management position opening up next month, and I want to put your name forward, but I need you to understand something first. The board has certain expectations about image and professionalism. Your work has always been excellent, but the appearance has been holding you back. He'd leaned forward. If you're serious about moving up in this company, you need to look the part, clean-cut, professional, someone clients can take seriously. Think about it. That conversation had been rattling around in my head all morning. Years of doing excellent work that apparently wasn't enough because of how I looked. 5 years of being passed over for promotions I'd never known I was being considered for. So, I'd walked into that barber shop and made a decision that was supposed to be about my career, but was turning into something much more complicated. That evening at dinner with Natasha's mother, Eleanor, I watched her face transform the moment she saw me, her usual expression of polite disapproval when, looking at me, completely vanished, replaced by genuine warmth and approval. "Victor, you look wonderful. So professional and put together. I barely recognized you." She actually hugged me, which she'd never done before in 12 years. Throughout dinner, she kept making comments about how nice it was to finally see my face, how much younger I looked, how I finally seemed like I was taking life seriously. Each comment felt like a backhanded insult about the previous 5 years, and I watched Natasha getting quieter and quieter as her mother went on. Finally, Natasha put down her fork with more force than necessary. "Mom, Victor's been the same person this whole time. Same job. Been the same father. Been the same husband. The only thing that's changed is his hair. Why does that suddenly make him acceptable to you?" Eleanor looked taken aback. "I'm just saying he looks more mature now. More like someone who's got his life together. There's nothing wrong with caring about appearance, Natasha. You, of all people, should understand that." Comment hung in the air, and I saw Natasha's face go pale. "What's that supposed to mean?" Eleanor dabbed at her mouth with her napkin. "Just that you've always cared about how things look, how people perceive you. It's why you were so drawn to Victor when he had that whole artistic look going on. It made you seem more interesting by association." I felt my stomach drop as intenses of myants. Pieces started clicking into place. Natasha and I had dated briefly in college. When I looked like I did now, she'd broken up with me, saying I was too conventional and boring. Years later, we'd reconnected when I had long hair and a full beard, and she'd acted like I was a completely different calm person. Someone exciting and interesting, enough to marry, but I'd never thought too deeply about why my appearance had mattered so much to her. Eleanor was still talking, oblivious to the tension she'd created. "I remember when you brought Victor around the first time in college. I told you he seemed nice, but a bit dull, and you agreed. You said you needed someone with more personality. Then years later, you showed up with this long-haired version and acted like you'd found your soulmate. I never understood what changed." Natasha's hands were shaking. "Mom, can we please not do this right now?" But Eleanor wasn't done. "I'm just saying. It's funny how things come full circle. Here's Victor, looking like he did back then. And suddenly, you're uncomfortable. You wonder what you really fell in love with. Doesn't it?" Excruciating. Liam picked at his food and kept looking between me and Natasha, with worry on his face. Eleanor seemed oblivious to the damage she'd caused, chattering on about her book club and neighborhood gossip. Natasha was silent, her face pale, and her hands gripping her fork too tightly. When we finally left, Liam fell asleep in the car on the way home, exhausted from the emotional day. Natasha and I drove in silence until we pulled into our driveway. Before we got out, she turned to me with tears streaming down her face. "Your mother might be right," I said quietly. "Maybe I did fall in love with your appearance instead of you." The honesty of it felt like a punch to the gut. So, what does that mean for us now, that I look like this again? She wiped her eyes. I don't know. What I feel for you is real, or if it was, all built on something superficial. Can you give me that time? The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing with 10 messages. My boss, Philip, had sent 3 texts overnight. Been thinking about our conversation. Senior VP, position opens in 2 weeks. You'd be perfect. Let's fast track this. Below, that was another message. Monday. Want to introduce you as a candidate. And they're looking for. And then a final one. This could mean 80 kiloamperes salary, increase, plus bonuses. This is your Plazen shot. I showed the messages to Natasha over breakfast. She read them without expression. So, your boss basically told you to change your appearance for a past-pinned promotion and you did it. How long are you been planning this? I hadn't been planning it. Not really. But saying that out loud sounded weak. It was just time for a change. The promotion was just good timing. She sat down her coffee cup, hard enough that it sloshed. Good timing, Victor. You've been working there for 5 years. 5 years of them, seeing you one way and treating you one way. Now, you look different, and suddenly, you're management material. And you don't see a problem with that? Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. A woman's voice came through, confident and professional. Is this Victor Reeves? This is Veronica Hastings. We dated briefly about 8 years ago. I hope this isn't too strange, but your boss, Philip, is my cousin, and he mentioned you'd changed your appearance. I was looking at your LinkedIn and realized it was the same Victor I dated. I wanted to reach out because I've been thinking about you lately. I felt ice in my stomach. Veronica and I had dated for about 2 months before I'd grown out my hound hair. She dumped me for being too boring and conventional. I haven't thought about you in years, I said carefully, very aware of Natasha, listening to every word. Veronica laughed. No. But seeing your photo looking like you used to, it brought back memories. We had something good before things ended. I wondered if you'd want to get coffee, and catch up. I'm back in town, and thought it would be nice to reconnect. I ended the call quickly and looked at Natasha, whose face had gone from pale to bright red. Your ex-girlfriend, the one who dumped you for being boring. She wants to reconnect now that you look the way you used to. This is unbelievable. She stood up, so fast. Her chair fell over. I need to go for a drive. I need to think. She grabbed her keys and left before I could say anything, and I heard our car tearing out of the driveway. Appeared in the doorway, still in his pajamas. Is Mom coming back? I pulled him close. Yeah, buddy. She just needs some space. He looked up at me with those 2 wise eyes. This is all because you cut your hair, isn't it? Everything's falling apart because of hair. That seems really dumb. Didn't come home until late that night. When she did, she found me sitting in the living room with a bottle of whiskey I'd barely touched. She sat down across from me, and I could see she'd been crying for hours. I need to tell you something, and I need you to not interrupt until I'm finished. Shaky breath. When we dated the first time in college, I cheated on you multiple times with multiple people. And when you started asking questions about where I was going and why I was distant, I panicked, so I broke up with you and made it about you being boring and conventional. I made you think you were the problem so I wouldn't have to admit I was the one who'd betrayed you. Words hit me like physical blows. But I stayed silent because she'd asked me to. Years later, when we ran into each other again, and you looked so different, I convinced myself you were a different person, that we could start over because you weren't the same boring guy I'd cheated on. But you were the same person, Victor. You'd always been interesting and kind and everything I should have wanted. I was just too selfish and immature to see it. She was crying harder now. And now, you look like that version of me I betrayed again. I can't escape the guilt. Every time I look at you, I see the person I hurt, the person I lied to for years about why our first relationship ended. Living with this secret our entire marriage, and seeing your face again has made it impossible to keep pretending. I finally found my voice, so our entire relationship has been based on you running away from guilt. She nodded, miserably. I think so, at least, partially, and I don't know how to fix that, or if it can even be fixed. But you deserve to know the truth. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our quiet suburban street where everything appeared normal and peaceful. How many people during our first relationship? Her voice was barely a whisper. 6. Over the course of 3 months, and none of them meant anything. I was just broken and stupid and hurting people because I could. I turned to face her. Does anyone else know? Your friends? Your mother? She shook her head. Just me. I've been carrying it alone for 8 years. I thought about Eleanor's comments at dinner about how Natasha had always cared about appearances and being seen with interesting people. I thought about how quickly Natasha had jumped to date me, again when I looked different, like I was a costume she could wear to seem more interesting to others. And I thought about the past 5 years of scare marriage that now felt like they'd been built on sand. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. I needed space to think. And I couldn't face going into that office where people would be treating me differently based on nothing but a haircut. I spent the morning sitting in our backyard while Liam was at school, trying to process everything that had come out in the past 24 hours. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Veronica standing there, looking exactly like I remembered, but older, more polished, and professional in a way that suggested she'd found the success and excitement she'd been chasing when we were younger. Victor, I know I should have waited for you to call me back, but I couldn't stop thinking about seeing you again. Can we talk? Against my better judgment, I let her in. We sat in the living room where Natasha and I had been 12 hours earlier, and the irony wasn't lost on me. Veronica leaned forward, her eyes bright, with something that looked like desperation, masked as confidence. I made a mistake when I ended things with us. I was young and stupid and thought I needed someone more exciting. But I've dated a lot of exciting people over the Trappers' years. And you know what? Exciting gets old. Stable and kind doesn't. I felt a bitter laugh escape. So, now that I look the way you remember, up where we left off. Just like that, she reached for my hand, but I pulled back. I know how it sounds, but I'm serious, Victor. I've thought about you so many times over the years. Wondered what my life would be like if I hadn't been so foolish. And when Philip mentioned you at a family dinner last week and showed me your photo, it felt like fate. The timing of this was too suspicious. You just happened to be at a dinner with Philip where he showed you my photo, and this happened before, or after he told me I needed to change my appearance for a promotion. Her face flickered with something like guilt before settling back into practiced confidence. He might have mentioned he was encouraging you to update your professional image, and I might have suggested he show me your photo to confirm it was the same Victor I'd half dated. But that doesn't change the fact that seeing you looking like yourself again made me realize what I'd lost. Before I could respond, the front door opened and Natasha walked in. She'd clearly come home on her lunch break and froze when she saw Veronica sitting in our living room. Her face went through shock, recognition, and fury. In about 2 seconds flat, Veronica stood up, smoothly, extending her hand. Be the current wife. Victor and I dated years ago, and I just stopped by to catch up. Natasha ignored the hand. I know who you are. You're the woman who told Victor he was too boring and conventional, then dumped him when you found someone more exciting. And now you're here in our house because he looks the way you remember. Veronica's smile didn't falter. People change. Perspectives change. I'm just trying to reconnect with an old friend. Natasha took a step closer to her, and I could see her hands shaking with rage. Get out of my house. Physically throw you out. Save my marriage, and I don't need you. Circling my husband like a vulture just because he got a haircut. The confrontation escalated fast. Veronica's polished exterior cracked. Save your marriage. From what Philip told me, marriage has been on the rocks for years. Victor's been unhappy and just didn't realize he had other options. Natasha actually grabbed Veronica's arm and started pulling her toward the door. I don't know what lies Philip's been feeding you, but my husband isn't interested in whatever fantasy you've built up in your head, and he certainly isn't interested in someone who judged him for something as shallow as appearance. Veronica yanked her arm free and turned on me. Victor, tell her that you called me back last night, that we talked for an hour about old times and how much you've been rethinking your life lately. My blood went cold because that was a complete lie, but I could see the fear and doubt flash across Natasha's face before she could hide it. I never called you. I ended our conversation yesterday and blocked your number. I don't know what game you're playing, but you need to leave. Now. Veronica's mask dropped, completely, revealing something ugly underneath. Fine. But when this marriage implodes because she can't love the real you, remember that I saw who you actually were, and I'm willing to come back for that person. Some of us learn from our mistakes. Natasha physically pushed her out the door and slammed it so hard the windows rattled. Then she turned to me with tears streaming down her face. Did you call her? And before you answer, remember that I've already confessed the worst thing I've ever done to you. Don't lie to me now. I showed her my phone with Veronica's number, blocked from the night before. I never called her. I don't know why she'd make that up, but I never called her. Natasha sank onto the couch, her whole body shaking. This is a nightmare. Your boss is dangling a promotion to manipulate your appearance. Your ex is making up lies to break us up. My mother is thrilled you look conventional again, and I'm drowning in guilt about things I did 8 years ago, all because of a haircut. That afternoon, while Natasha went back to work in a daze, I got a call from Philip. Victor, we need to talk. Can you come to the office? There's been a situation. When I arrived, Philip's door was closed, and I could hear raised voices inside. His assistant looked uncomfortable and gestured for me to wait. Minutes. The door opened, and Veronica stormed out, her face blotchy from crying. She didn't look at me as she passed. Philip waved me in, looking exhausted. His confident demeanor from earlier in the week was completely gone. Sit down, Victor. We have a problem. Sat, wondering what fresh hell was about to be revealed. Veronica just quit her job at my company. She's been working in our marketing department for the past 3 months. I hired her because she's my cousin, and she needed work after being rated. Let go from her last position for inappropriate workplace behavior. He rubbed his face. She apparently became fixated on you after seeing your photo at a family dinner. She's been pressuring me to push for your promotion, to encourage you to change your inefficient appearance. All because she had this fantasy about reconnecting with you, and I went along with it because I'm an idiot who thought I was helping my cousin, while also genuinely believing you'd be good for the senior role. My head was spinning. So real. But you've been manipulating me to get it based on your cousin's obsession with my appearance. Philip looked genuinely ashamed. The promotion is real. Your work has always been excellent, and you deserve to be considered for it. But I let Veronica's influence cloud my judgment about the cloud appearance stuff. I convinced myself I was giving you good career advice when, really, I was helping my cousin recreate some fantasy from her past. The board wants to meet you on Monday, but now I'm questioning everything about how we got in life here. I stood up, feeling anger replaced the confusion. So, you told me my appearance had been holding me back for 5 years, made me think I needed to change who I was to be taken seriously. All because your mentally unstable cousin wanted me to look like I did when we dated. Philip nodded miserably. I'm sorry, Victor. I should have seen what it's did and she was doing. She's got a pattern of this kind of thing. fixating on people, and manipulating situations to get close to them. That's why she lost her last job. I filed a formal complaint against her this morning, and she resigned before HR could finish their investigation. I left the office feeling like my entire reality had been built on lies and manipulation. The promotion I'd thought was my big career break was tainted by someone else's obsession. The haircut I'd gotten to advance professionally had destroyed my marriage and my son's sense of security. And everyone around me had revealed themselves to be operating from ulterior motives I'd never suspected. When I got home, I found Eleanor sitting in my living room with Natasha and Liam. Atmosphere was tense, and Liam immediately came to stand next to me, like he was choosing sides. Eleanor looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Natasha told me everything about her cheating in college, about lying to you for years, about how she's been using your Hans's appearance as an excuse to avoid dealing with her guilt. She paused. Told me about your ex-girlfriend showing up and your boss manipulating you. The whole situation is a mess that I apparently contributed to with my judgmental attitude about how people should look. I sat down carefully, feeling like I was in some alternate universe where Eleanor was being self-aware and apologetic. Natasha's hands were twisted together in her lap. I called my mother because I needed help figuring out what to do, how to fix this, if it can even be fixed. Leaned forward. Victor, I owe you an apology. I've been shallow and judgmental for years, and I made my daughter think that appearance was more important than character. I praised the long-haired version of you because it fit my image of what I thought was interesting, and I praised the short-haired version because it fit my image of what I thought was professional, but I never just appreciated you for being a good husband and father, regardless of how you looked. Liam spoke up then, his voice small but determined. Dad's been the same person the whole time. He makes the same terrible jokes. He still can't fold fitted sheets. He still helps me with homework, even when he doesn't understand the new math they're teaching. The only thing that changed was his hair, and everyone started acting crazy because of it. Out of the mouths of babes. Eleanor actually smiled through her tears. You're absolutely right, sweetheart, and I'm sorry for being one of the crazy adults. The next few days were a blur of difficult conversations. Natasha and I sat down with a therapist to figure out if our marriage could survive the revelations. The therapist, Dr. Okafor, listened to our story and then said something that surprised both of us. It sounds like the haircut forced both of you to confront truths you'd been avoiding for years. Victor, you've been performing a version of yourself that you thought people wanted to see. Natasha, accountability for past actions. Convincing yourself you'd married a different person. Things are sustainable. She looked at us, both seriously. The question isn't whether your marriage can survive Victor's appearance change. The question is whether either of you can build a relationship based on honesty instead of performance and avoidance. At work, things got more complicated. Philip called another meeting and told me that HR had conducted a full review of the senior management hiring process. They'd found that Veronica had been inappropriately influencing several business decisions, not just my situation. The promotion was still on the table, but the board wanted assurances that I wanted it for the right reasons and that I wasn't being manipulated. More importantly, they wanted me to understand that the company's obsession with appearance as a marker of professionalism was outdated and problematic. I sat across from 3 board members and told them the truth. I changed my appearance because I was told it would help my career, and it probably would have, which says terrible things about this company's values. Doing excellent work for 5 years took looking a certain way for you to skin. Notice, that's not a company culture. I'm not sure I want to climb within. One of the board members, a woman named Patricia, who'd been with the company for 20 years, actually smiled. That's the first honest thing anyone said in this room in months. You're right that our culture has problems. And you're right that appearance shouldn't matter more than competence. If you're willing to help us change that culture, we'd like you in that senior role. Not because of how you look, but because someone who can speak that kind of truth is exactly what we need in leadership. 2 weeks after the Con 1 haircut that had blown up my life, I found myself sitting on our back porch with Natasha and Liam, trying to figure out what came next. Natasha had started individual therapy to work through her guilt and her patterns of using appearance to avoid deeper issues. I'd started my own therapy to figure out why I'd been so willing to shapeshift based on other people's expectations. And Liam had been seeing a child therapist to help him process the upheaval. Liam looked at me seriously. "Dad, I'm going to grow your hair back?" I thought about it. Honestly, I don't know. I miss having it sometimes. But I also kind of like being able to see my face clearly. Maybe I'll find some middle ground. Maybe I'll grow it back completely. Point is, whatever I do with it will be my choice, not something I'm doing because of what other people think or want. Natasha reached for my hand, tentatively. I've been thinking a lot about what Dr. Okafor said about how neither of us has been honest. I want to try being honest now, even though it's scary. I'm not sure I know how to love someone without hiding behind fantasies and projections. But I want to learn. I'm willing to do the work if you are. I looked at this woman I'd married 5 years ago, who I thought I'd known, who'd turned out to be far more complicated and damaged than I'd realized. Do you love me? The real me, not the version with long hair or short hair, but the actual person underneath. She was quiet for a long moment. I'm learning to, I think I've always loved parts of you, but I built walls around the parts that made me feel guilty or uncomfortable. I want to tear down those walls and see if what's left is enough to build something real on. It wasn't the declaration of undying love I'd fantasized about when I'd proposed 5 years ago, but it was honest, and that felt more valuable than any romantic fantasy. The following Monday, I showed up for the board meeting about the senior management position. But I showed up with my hair pulled back in a small ponytail. I'd started letting it grow again, not because I wanted to look artistic or interesting, but because I'd realized I actually liked having longer hair. It felt like me, in a way the ultra shortcut never quite had. Patricia noticed immediately and smiled, making a statement. "Victor." I shook my head. Just being myself. If that's not professional enough for the board, Then this probably isn't the right position for me anyway. She laughed. Perfect answer. About the actual job requirements, instead of your grooming choices. The meeting went well, and I accepted the position with the understanding that part of my role would be pushing for cultural changes around appearance-based discrimination. That evening, Veronica called from a blocked number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. She was crying. I'm so sorry, Victor. I've been getting help, and my therapist helped me see how obsessive and inappropriate my behavior was. I convinced myself that if you looked the way I remembered, we could go back to that time in my life when things felt simpler. But that was never about you. It was about my own issues with aging and regret and not dealing with my mistakes. I listened without saying much. And when she finished, I simply said, I hope you get the help you need, Veronica, but please don't contact me or my family again. She agreed and hung up, and I blocked the number immediately. Some people come into your life to teach you lessons. And Veronica had taught me that other people's projections and fantasies have nothing to do with who you actually are. 3 months after the haircut, our family had settled into a new rhythm. Therapy sessions twice a week for Natasha and me, both individually and together. Weekly family meetings where even Liam got to voice his concerns and feelings. A conscious effort to be honest about things that were hard instead of hiding behind comfortable lies. Natasha came home one day with a significant haircut of her own. Not as dramatic as mine had been, but enough to be noticeable. She'd cut her long hair into a shoulder-length bob, and she looked nervous as she showed me. I wanted to see if I could handle people treating me differently based on appearance. I wanted to understand what you went through, and I wanted to stop hiding behind my hair the way I've been hiding behind so many other things. Pulled her close. How do you feel? Terrified, liberated. Like I've taken off a costume I'd been wearing for so long I forgot it wasn't my actual skin. She looked up at me. Your hair is growing back. I nodded. Yeah. Turns out I like having some length to it. Not as long as before, but longer than the super short cut. Just finding what feels right for me instead of what I think other people want. She smiled. I like that you're finding yourself. I like that we're both finding ourselves, even though the process is messy and uncomfortable. Over the next several months, things continued to evolve. Ella Lehner actually started therapy of her own to address her judgmental attitudes and the way she'd projected her own insecurities onto her daughter. Philip implemented new hiring and promotion guidelines at work that focused on competence rather than appearance. And my relationship with Natasha deepened in ways it never had before, built on honesty instead of fantasy. One evening, about 6 months after the original haircut, I found Liam looking at old family photos. He was comparing pictures of me with long hair to recent ones with shorter hair that was growing back out. Dad, I've been thinking about something. When you first came home looking different, I didn't recognize you. But now I realize that was kind of dumb. I recognized you the whole time. I just couldn't see past the outside change to remember the inside stuff. I sat down next to him. That's a pretty profound realization for an 1-year-old. He shrugged, helped me figure it out. She said, sometimes people use appearance to distract from having to deal with harder stuff. Like how I was mad about your stewed haircut because it was easier than being mad about mom's lying or grandma's judging or everything feeling unstable. The haircut was just the thing that made Beth all the other stuff visible. I ruffled his hair and he swatted my hand away with a grin. So, are you and Mom going to stay married? It was the question he'd been dancing around for months. And I appreciated him finally asking it directly. We're trying. We're both doing a lot of work to figure out if we can build something real instead of something based on fantasy and avoidance. I can't promise it'll work out, but I can promise we're both trying our best. He nodded solemnly. That's good. Because even though this whole thing has been weird and hard, I kind of like that we're all being more honest now. It feels more real. Even when real is uncomfortable. A year after the haircut, Natasha and I sat in Dr. Okapor's office for what we'd decided would be our final couples therapy session. We'd made progress. Genuine progress. But we'd also come to a difficult realization. Dr. Okapor at us both. So, you've decided to separate, not divorce immediately, but create some space to figure out who you are as individuals before deciding if you can be partners. Natasha nodded, tears streaming down her face. I love Victor. I really do, but I'm not sure I know how to be in a healthy relationship yet. I'm still unpacking years of using fantasy and projection to avoid dealing with my own issues. And Victor deserves someone who can love him fully and, honestly, not someone who's still learning how to be honest with herself. I reached for her hand, and I need to figure out who I am without constantly shapeshifting based on what I think other people need from me. I've spent so long being different versions of myself for different people that I'm not sure I take it know who the real me is anymore. Dr. Okapor smiled sadly. This is actually a sign of tremendous growth. Choosing honesty and self-awareness over clinging to something comfortable but unhealthy. That takes real courage. Separation was amicable and thoughtful. We agreed to share custody of Liam 50/50, with both of us staying in town so he could keep his school and friends. We sold the house and moved into separate apartments, both close enough to each other that Liam could easily go between them. Eleanor, surprisingly, was supportive. She'd been doing her own work in therapy and had developed a much healthier perspective on relationships and appearance. She told me one day when picking up Liam, "You know, Victor, I think you cutting your hair was the best thing that could have happened to this family. Not because you looked better or worse either way, but because it forced all of us to confront truths we'd been avoiding. And sometimes the truth breaks things apart before they can be rebuilt properly. 6 months into the separation, I ran into someone unexpected at a coffee shop. A woman around my age with kind eyes and a genuine smile. She was reading a book about psychology and personal growth. And when I commented on, "It's it," we ended up talking for 2 hours about change and identity and the work of becoming authentic. Her name was Diane, and she'd been through her own journey of self-discovery after a difficult divorce. We exchanged numbers, and over the following months, we became friends. Just friends. Because neither of us was ready for anything more. But it was the first relationship I'd had where I felt like I could be completely myself without performing or shape-shifting. Where my appearance was just one small part of who I was, not something that defined how someone saw me. Liam adjusted to the separation better than I'd feared. He had his own room in both apartments, and he appreciated that both Natasha and I were calmer and more present when he was with us. One evening, while we were making dinner together, he said something that made me stop chopping vegetables. "You know what's weird, Dad?" Everyone acted like your haircut was this huge, dramatic thing. But the real problem was all the lies and fakeness that were already there. The haircut just made them visible. It's like when you turn on a light in a dark room and suddenly you can see all the dirt and mess that was always there. You didn't create the mess. By turning on the light, you just stopped hiding from it. I hugged him tight, amazed by his wisdom. "When did you get so smart?" He hugged me back, probably from having to deal with all you crazy adults and your identity crisis. 2 years after the haircut that had changed everything, my hair had grown back to shoulder length. Time. I wore it because I wanted to, not because I thought it made me more interesting, or because anyone else preferred it that way. I'd been promoted to vice president at work and had successfully implemented several policy changes around appearance-based discrimination. Natasha and I had started dating again, slowly and carefully. Both of us, different people than we'd been before. She'd been doing intensive therapy and had confronted the patterns that had led her to cheat and lie years ago. I've been working on establishing boundaries and knowing myself well enough to not shapeshift based on others' expectations. We were taking it slow with no guarantees about where it would lead, but with a foundation of honesty that felt more solid than anything we'd built before. Ella Lanar had become an unexpected ally, volunteering with organizations that worked against appearance-based discrimination, and even speaking at events about how her own prejudices had damaged her relationships. She'd apologized to me multiple times, genuine apologies that acknowledged the specific harm her judgments had caused. Liam was thriving, now 13, and somehow both wise, beyond his years, and still wonderfully childlike. He developed an interest in psychology and social justice, probably influenced by everything he'd witnessed and processed over the past 2 years. He volunteered at a youth center, helping other kids deal with family transitions, and his therapist said he'd turned his trauma into purpose in a remarkably healthy way. One evening, the three of us, Natasha, Liam, and I, sat together at a restaurant celebrating Liam's birthday. It was casual and comfortable, with none of the tension that had characterized our family dinners 2 years earlier. Liam looked at both of us and raised his glass of soda. "I want to make a toast to Dad's haircut," which was simultaneously the worst and best thing that ever happened to our family. We laughed and clinked-kecked glasses, and I realized he was right. That simple act of cutting off 5 years of hair growth had been the catalyst for everything that followed. It had exposed lies and manipulations and shallow judgments that had been poisoning our relationships. It had forced all of us to confront who we really were versus who we'd been pretending to be. Walking out of that restaurant with Natasha on one side and Liam on the other, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the false peace of avoiding difficult truths, but the real peace that comes from facing those truths and building something authentic on the other side. My hair was long again, but I knew now that I could cut it tomorrow if I wanted to, and it wouldn't change who I was. Could grow it to my waist or shave it all off. And the only opinion that mattered was my own. Appreciate you watching this far. Drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe so you won't miss the next.